Okay, Reddit, gather round because I need to get this off my chest. It's a story about my family, love, money, and how an obsession with one almost destroyed the other. You know how some families have those quirky traditions or harmless little arguments? Well, my family's thing was a bit more intense. For them, your bank account balance was practically a measure of your soul's worth. And me? I was the one who dared to suggest a different currency. It all started, or at least the part that really matters for this story, when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Wear the blue dress tonight, darling. The one with the good neckline. The Hendersons are joining us for dinner, and their son, Julian, will be there. My stomach did a little flip, and not the good kind. This wasn't just dinner, it was an auction, and I was apparently the prize pony. What my mother's text didn't say, but what was thunderingly loud in its omission, was that Julian Henderson wasn't just any son. He was the Julian Henderson, heir to the Henderson hardware empire, owner of a jaw-dropping penthouse, and, according to my parents, my golden ticket. What they didn't know, or rather chose to ignore, was that my heart had already been given away to a man whose only empire was the small, chaotic, but utterly wonderful world we were building together, one laugh and one shared dream at a time. This is the story of how my family, blinded by dollar signs, nearly pushed me away forever, and how they eventually, painstakingly, learned that the best things in life aren't things at all. Let me paint you a picture of my upbringing. We weren't super rich, not Henderson level by any stretch, but comfortably upper middle class. My dad, Michael, was a successful architect, and my mom, Susan, had a thriving interior design business. They'd worked incredibly hard to get where they were. I learned later, in hushed tones and fragmented stories, that their own parents had faced significant hardships. My maternal grandfather lost his business during an economic downturn, a scar my mother carried deeply, translating into a fierce, almost desperate desire for unwavering stability for her own children. My father, too, had seen his share of lean years before his career took off. This unspoken history was the fuel for their obsession, a fear I didn't fully comprehend until much later. For them, financial security wasn't just comfort, it was survival, a bulwark against the storms they'd weathered. Dinner party conversations revolved around stock portfolios, property values, and whose kids got into which Ivy League school. Success was measured in square footage and carat weight. My older sister, Clara, had towed the line perfectly. She married a surgeon, Mark, lived in a gated community, and produced two impeccably dressed grandchildren who called my parents grand-père and grand-mère, a touch my mother adored. Clara was the golden child, her life a testament to my parents' philosophy: secure the finances, and happiness will follow, or so it seemed on the surface. And then there was me, Emily. I was different. I'd chosen to be a teacher, specializing in art therapy for kids with special needs. My office was often messy with paint and glitter, my salary respectable but certainly not making headlines in the Financial Times. My parents called it my little hobby for years, always assuming I'd eventually see sense and marry someone who could provide the lifestyle they envisioned for me. "It's lovely you have a passion, dear," Mom would say, "but passion doesn't fund a retirement plan." The pressure started subtly after college. "Emily, dear, have you met Mrs. Albright's son? He's just made partner at his law firm." Or, "That lovely Dr. Evans is still single, you know. Such a good provider." It was like a constant low hum in the background of my life, punctuated by carefully curated anecdotes about the perils of marrying down. But the hum became a roar when I met Leo. Leo was a musician, a brilliant, passionate, struggling musician. We met at a tiny, dimly lit jazz club where he played the saxophone with such soul it felt like he was narrating the story of my own heart. He had eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, a laugh that could fill a stadium, even if he was usually playing to a room of 20, and a way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the most precious thing in the universe. His penthouse was a third-floor walk-up with mismatched furniture and walls adorned with concert posters and his own vibrant, abstract paintings. He drove a 10-year-old hatchback that rattled like a tin can, but always got us where we needed to go. He made me feel alive, cherished, and understood in a way no amount of money ever could. I knew from the moment I fell for Leo that my family would be a problem. For 6 months, I kept our relationship a secret. It was our little bubble of bliss, unmarred by parental interrogation or financial vetting. But secrets have a way of wanting to breathe. Plus, I was tired of lying by omission. I loved Leo, and I wanted my family to know him, to see what I saw. The big reveal was a disaster. I invited Leo for a casual Sunday brunch. My mom nearly choked on her artisanal quiche when Leo, after politely answering questions about his career prospects, mentioned his band was hoping to fund their first album through a Kickstarter campaign. My dad, usually more reserved, just kept staring at Leo's slightly frayed shirt cuff like it was a personal affront. I saw a flicker of that old fear in my mother's eyes, the fear of instability. After Leo left, bless his heart, he remained charming and respectful throughout the ordeal, even complimenting Dad's impressive bookshelf, which earned him a grunt. The dam broke. "A musician, Emily?" My mother had hissed, her face pale. "Are you serious? How will he support you? How will you live? Do you want to struggle like your grandparents did?" "We'll manage, Mom. We love each other. He's incredibly talented and hardworking." "Talent doesn't pay the mortgage, Emily," my father boomed, his voice echoing in the pristine living room. "Happiness is built on a foundation of security, not airy-fairy dreams and Kickstarter." His hands were clenched. I saw the shadow of his own past anxieties. That was the beginning of the Julian Henderson campaign. My parents, convinced I was on a path to destitution and misery, went into overdrive. Julian, by all outward appearances, was the perfect antidote to Leo. He was handsome in a polished, GQ sort of way, articulate and undeniably wealthy. Our first arranged dinner was excruciating. Julian talked mostly about his latest yacht acquisition and the challenges of managing his offshore investments. He barely asked me any questions about myself. When he did, it felt like he was ticking boxes on a checklist. Educated? Check. Presentable? Check. Suitable lineage? Check. At one point, he even took a call mid-conversation, waving a dismissive hand and saying, "Business, you understand." I understood all right. I understood I was less interesting than his stockbroker. I remember him commenting on the restaurant's art, dismissing it as derivative, completely missing the passion I saw in the brushstrokes, the kind of passion Leo poured into his music. My parents were ecstatic. "He's so refined, Emily," Mom gushed afterwards. "And did you see his watch? That's a Patek Philippe." "He barely spoke to me, Mom. He was more interested in the wine list and his phone." "He's a busy man, dear. He's serious. He's not going to waste time with frivolous chatter. He knows what he wants." Yes, I thought, and it seems to be a trophy, not a partner. The pressure became relentless. Daily calls from Mom, helpful articles about successful power couples, where the wife often had a charming but not too demanding career. Casual drop-ins by my dad to talk about long-term financial planning. Clara even called, her voice laced with genuine but misguided concern. "Emily, just think about it. Life is so much easier when you don't have to worry about money. Julian can give you everything." "Everything material, maybe," I'd countered, but my words felt lost in the wind. "But does he give her what she wants?" Leo had asked gently one evening, holding me as I cried in frustration in his small apartment. The smell of old books, oil paints, and his comforting scent was my sanctuary. "Does he make your heart sing, Eli? Does he see the colors you see in the world?" He didn't. Julian made my stomach churn with anxiety. The thought of a life with him, a life of sterile perfection, polite but empty conversations, and a constant awareness of financial transactions, felt like a beautifully gilded cage. The worst part was the doubt they managed to plant. Was I being naive? Was I romanticizing poverty? Could Leo and I truly make it? He worked part-time at a music store to make ends meet, taught guitar lessons to kids, and poured every spare cent and moment into his band. There was one particularly rough month when his old car broke down, needing expensive repairs right when our rent was due. Leo looked so defeated that night, staring at the bills spread on our tiny kitchen table. "Maybe they're right, Eli," he whispered, his usual optimism faltering. Maybe I can't give you the life you deserve. That was a stab to my heart. The life I deserve is with you, I told him fiercely, holding his face in my hands. We'll figure it out. We always do. We ate ramen for 2 weeks straight, and he took extra shifts. But we did figure it out. And that struggle, that shared victory, made us stronger. The breaking point came about 3 months into the Julian project. My parents announced they were throwing an engagement party for Clara's sister-in-law at their house. And Emily, my mother said, her voice dangerously sweet. Julian will be your escort. It's all arranged. It's time everyone saw you together as a couple. It wasn't a request. It was a command, an ultimatum wrapped in silk. I felt a cold fury rise within me. No, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. What did you say? No, Mom, I won't be going with Julian. I'll be going with Leo. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Then a torrent of words: disappointment, anger, accusations of ungratefulness, predictions of my inevitable ruin, her voice cracking with that old fear. My father got on the line, his voice cold and hard. If you walk into that party with that musician, Emily, you might as well not walk into our lives again. You need to understand the gravity of your choices. This isn't a game. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. For a week, I was a wreck. I barely ate, barely slept. Leo was my rock, constantly reassuring me that whatever I chose, he'd support me, but also encouraging me to stand up for my own happiness. He never once badmouthed my parents. He just said he hoped they'd see me, not just their idea of me. Your heart knows the way, Eli, he'd said. Trust it. The night of the party arrived. I wore a simple, elegant dress I'd bought from a thrift store for $10 and felt more beautiful than I ever had in the expensive outfits my mother preferred. Leo, in a borrowed suit that was a little too big in the shoulders but worn with an undeniable charm, looked nervous but proud, his hand warm and steady in mine. As we walked up the driveway to my parents' beautifully lit home, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. The instant we stepped into the foyer, a hush fell over the assembled guests. My parents stood near the entrance, their faces masks of polite frostiness. My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes, which darted nervously toward Julian, who was standing near her, looking smug and holding a champagne flute like a scepter. He caught my eye and gave a small, condescending smirk, as if to say, "You actually went through with this folly?" My mother approached, her smile brittle. "Emily, and Leo, how unexpected." "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly but firm. "This is Leo, my partner." My father just nodded curtly, his jaw tight. His eyes, however, held a flicker of pain that he quickly masked. The rest of the evening was a blur of strained conversations, pitying looks from some relatives, and a few surprisingly warm smiles from others who perhaps admired my quiet rebellion. My Aunt Carol, Dad's younger sister who'd always been a bit of a free spirit, gave me a subtle thumbs up. Julian pointedly ignored me after his initial smirk, loudly regaling a captive audience about his upcoming skiing trip to Gstad. The real surprise came later that evening. My usually stoic, pragmatic father cornered me in the hallway leading to the garden. His face was etched with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Anger, yes, but also something akin to deep, painful confusion. "Emily," he said, his voice low and gruff, "I don't understand you. We've given you everything. We only want you to be secure, happy." "Dad, I am happy," I pleaded, tears welling. "Leo makes me happy. Can't you see that? Security isn't just about money. It's about being loved for who you are. It's about support, laughter, shared dreams. It's about knowing someone has your back, no matter what." He just shook his head, the gesture heavy with finality. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Emily. You're young, you're idealistic. Life will teach you harsh lessons." His words stung, a fresh wound on top of months of pressure, but they also solidified my resolve. He was wrong, and I would spend my life proving it. The fallout was immediate and harsh. My parents didn't exactly disown me, but they might as well have. Phone calls became infrequent and strained, usually ending in frustration on both sides. Invitations to family events dried up. The silence from their end was a constant ache. Clara, caught in the middle, tried to mediate, but mostly ended up echoing my parents' concerns, albeit more gently. I just worry about you, Eli, she'd say. Mark and I have it easy in some ways, and I want that for you too. Easy isn't always happy, Clara, I'd reply. I didn't know then how true that was for her. It hurt, deeply. There were nights I cried myself to sleep in Leo's arms, mourning the relationship I once had with my family, feeling like an orphan despite having living parents. But through it all, Leo was my constant. Our tiny apartment became our haven. We faced the challenges head on. We learned to budget like pros. Leo picked up more teaching gigs, and his band started getting more local bookings, small at first, but growing. He'd come home exhausted, but exhilarated after a good gig, his eyes shining. I poured my energy into my work, finding immense satisfaction in helping the children I worked with unlock their voices through art. We celebrated small victories, a good review for his band in a local paper, a breakthrough with one of my most withdrawn students, finding a rare first edition book for pennies at a flea market that we both loved. Our life wasn't glamorous. There were no exotic vacations or designer clothes. Our fancy dinners were pasta dishes we cooked together, experimenting with spices, accompanied by cheap wine that we pretended was vintage. Our entertainment was often free concerts in the park, board game nights with friends who valued us for who we were, or simply talking for hours curled up on our lumpy sofa, planning imaginary futures and dissecting the day. And it was glorious. It was real. It was ours. Every shared laugh, every problem solved together, wove our lives more tightly. One of the first surprises that life threw at us was actually about Julian. About a year after the infamous party, word got around through the society grapevine, which still, occasionally, reached me via Aunt Carol, that Henderson Hardware was in trouble. Turns out, Julian, who had taken over much of the company's operations with an arrogant belief in his own Midas touch, had made a series of reckless investments and gambles, trying to quickly expand the empire. He'd ignored the advice of seasoned board members, believing them to be too cautious. The company was facing serious financial difficulties, and there were even rumors of bankruptcy. The penthouse was sold. The yacht was repossessed. Julian, once the epitome of financial prowess, was facing his own crisis. I didn't rejoice in his misfortune. That's not me. But it was a stark reminder that wealth could be incredibly fickle. The security my parents so coveted could vanish in an instant. It was a silent, potent counter-argument to everything they believed. Meanwhile, Leo's band, The Rafters, had, against all odds, recorded their Kickstarter-funded album in a friend's makeshift studio. It was raw, passionate, and utterly them. They'd sent it out to dozens of small indie labels and local radio stations with hopeful hearts. Many rejections followed, or worse, silence. Leo faced this with a resilience I deeply admired, though I saw the occasional flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Maybe this is just a dream, Eli," he said one night, after a particularly harsh rejection. "No," I told him, "it's your calling. Keep going." Then, one late evening, we were huddled over our laptops, sharing a bowl of popcorn, when an email popped into Leo's inbox. A small but respected indie label based on the West Coast, known for nurturing unique talents, wanted to sign them. It wasn't a multi-million-dollar deal, but it was a real contract, with an advance, enough to replace his dying hatchback with a slightly less dying one, and a distribution plan. I'd never seen Leo so overwhelmed with joy. He just picked me up and spun me around our tiny living room, tears streaming down his face, laughing. It was a testament to his talent, his perseverance, and his refusal to give up on his dream. This was a turning point, not because of the money, the advance was modest, but because it was an external validation of Leo's passion. It was something tangible. I remember hesitantly calling my sister Clara to share the news. "That's nice, Emily," she said, her voice still tinged with skepticism. "But is it, stable? A real career?" "It's a start, Clara, a real start. And he's so happy. You should see him." There was a pause. Then, to my surprise, her voice softened. Actually, Eli, can we talk? I mean, really talk? A few days later, we met for coffee. Clara, my ever composed older sister, broke down. She confessed that her perfect marriage was far from it. Mark was a good man, a great provider, but he was emotionally distant, always exhausted from work. Their mansion felt empty. She was lonely. You have something with Leo, Eli, she admitted, tears in her eyes. Something real. I have a beautiful house and a fat bank account, but sometimes I feel like I'm starving. That conversation was a revelation. It was the first time Clara saw beyond the surface of my life, and I saw beyond the facade of hers. It was the beginning of a new, deeper bond between us. She became a secret ally, subtly trying to bridge the gap with our parents. The biggest surprise, the one that truly began to shift things with my parents, came from an unexpected quarter. About 2 years into my exile, my father had a serious health scare. He suffered a heart attack. It was sudden, terrifying. Mom called me, her voice frantic and broken, the icy composure gone. I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. Leo came with me without a moment's hesitation, his hand a comforting presence on my shoulder the entire drive. For the next week, as Dad lay in the ICU, it was Leo who was a quiet pillar of strength. He made coffee runs, sat with my distraught mother when I needed a break, listened patiently to her fears and regrets. He dealt with hospital administration, his calm demeanor a balm in the chaos. He even managed to make my usually formidable mother smile with a gentle joke here and there, remembering a funny story I'd told him about her. He never once said, "I told you so," or showed any resentment for their past treatment of him. He was just there, kind, compassionate, and incredibly capable. He understood that this wasn't about him or past grievances. It was about supporting the family of the woman he loved. Julian, I later learned, sent a very expensive flower arrangement with a typed card. He didn't visit. He was too busy with his company's restructuring, which by then was clearly a euphemism for its collapse. The contrast was not lost on anyone, especially my mother. My father's recovery was slow. During his recuperation at home, Leo and I visited regularly. Leo would often bring his guitar and play soft melodies for Dad, old jazz standards he knew Dad secretly liked from his own youth. A fact I'd once let slip. He'd talk to Dad about sports, about books, never about money or careers. He'd help him with his physical therapy exercises, his patience seemingly endless. And I saw something change in my father's eyes. He started watching Leo, really watching him. He saw the way Leo looked at me, the easy affection between us, the quiet support. He saw Leo patiently helping my mother with chores around the house, things that were now difficult for Dad. He saw Leo fix a leaky faucet that had been dripping for weeks, a practical skill my architect father appreciated. One afternoon, Dad was sitting in his armchair, looking weaker but more thoughtful than I'd seen him in years. Leo had just finished playing a song. "You know, son," Dad said, his voice raspy, addressing Leo directly with that word, son, for the first time with something other than polite detachment. That was quite good. Your mother mentioned you fixed the tap in the guest bathroom." "Thank you." Leo smiled. "Happy to help, Michael. Glad you enjoyed the music." "Emily tells me your band is doing well. A festival," she said. "We're getting there," Leo said modestly. "Playing a small festival next month. It's exciting." My dad nodded slowly. He looked at me, then back at Leo. "Your mother and I, we misjudged you, son. We misjudged a lot of things. Fear. Fear can make you blind." My breath caught in my throat. My mother, who was in the room arranging flowers, not Julian's, which had wilted and been quietly discarded, looked down at her hands, tears welling in her eyes. She reached out and tentatively patted Leo's arm. "Thank you, Leo, for everything." It wasn't an instant fix. Years of ingrained belief don't just evaporate, but it was a start, a huge, monumental start. The wall of ice between us had finally begun to melt. My mother was the next to thaw more completely, though her journey was more emotional. One day, she came to visit our little apartment unannounced. It was the first time she'd ever stepped foot in it. She looked around at our mismatched furniture, our overflowing bookshelves, the vibrant, if slightly chaotic, energy of the place. I saw her notice the framed photo of Leo and me laughing, taken on a windswept beach during a cheap weekend getaway. "It's cozy," she said, her voice uncertain, but without the critical edge it once would have had. "It feels alive." I made her tea, and we sat on our lumpy sofa. "Emily," she began, her voice trembling, "I owe you an apology, a huge one. We were so focused on giving you what we thought was best, what society told us was best, that we forgot to listen to you. We forgot to see you." She started to cry, really cry. "When your father was in the hospital, Julian sent flowers. Leo. Leo brought his heart. He was there for us, for your father, for me, in a way that all the money in the world couldn't buy. He showed us what true richness is." I went to her and held her as she wept. My own tears flowed freely. It was a moment of raw, painful, beautiful reconciliation. "I was so afraid for you," she whispered, "afraid you'd suffer like my parents did. I let that fear control me." Clara, now a frequent confidant, played her part too. She gently reinforced the changes she saw in Leo and me, and the happiness that was so evident. She even started bringing her kids over to our place, and they adored Uncle Leo, who taught them silly songs on his guitar. The transformation in my family wasn't like flipping a switch. It was gradual, filled with awkward conversations, moments of backtracking, and then renewed effort. They started inviting Leo to family dinners, and this time they asked him about his music, his life, his dreams, listening with genuine interest. My dad, once he was stronger, even attended one of the Rafters gigs at a local pub. I saw him tapping his foot, a small, almost shy smile playing on his lips. He sought Leo out afterwards, not to critique, but to say, "You've got real talent there, Leo. I see why Emily believes in you. I'm starting to believe too." It was one of an older, slightly battered, but undeniably proud father. The biggest surprise for them was perhaps realizing that Leo and I weren't just surviving. We were thriving. His band gained a respectable following. They weren't rock stars, but they made a decent living doing what they loved, touring regionally, their music resonating with more and more people. I continued my work, eventually opening a small art therapy studio with a friend, which became a vibrant community hub. We still weren't rich by my parents' old standards, but we were comfortable. We bought a small house with a tiny garden, which Leo filled with wildflowers, and I filled with wind chimes. We filled it with love, laughter, music, and art. My parents learned that financial security, while important, isn't the only ingredient for a happy life, and it certainly isn't the most important one. They learned that character, kindness, love, and mutual support are the true foundations. They saw firsthand that the son-in-law they'd initially dismissed as a penniless musician had more richness of character and brought more joy and stability to my life than the millionaire they'd tried to force on me. They began to find joy in simpler things too, influenced perhaps by our less materialistic life. Mom started gardening. Dad took up painting again, a passion he'd suppressed for decades. Julian Henderson? His company eventually did go bankrupt. Last I heard, he was working a mid-level management job for another corporation, his swagger considerably diminished. Aunt Carol mentioned he seemed humbled, quieter. I genuinely hope he finds his own version of happiness, whatever that may be for him. Perhaps his downfall was another quiet lesson for my parents, that fortunes can be lost, but integrity and love are far more enduring assets. So, Reddit, that's my story. My family didn't just learn a lesson, they underwent a profound transformation. We're closer now than we've ever been, our relationships rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect, rather than financial expectations. They adore Leo, seeing him now as the wonderful, caring, talented man he is. My dad and Leo often have long talks about music, history, and life, and my mom now proudly tells her friends about her artistic, entrepreneurial daughter and her wonderfully talented musician son-in-law who has the kindest heart. She even frames Leo's band posters. It wasn't an easy journey. There were times I felt utterly alone, heartbroken by my family's disapproval, questioning if I had the strength to stand against their formidable will. But holding on to what I knew in my heart was true, choosing love over expectation, was the best decision I ever made. It not only brought me a life filled with genuine joy with Leo, but also, eventually, gave me back my family, a family that finally understood that the richest life isn't about the balance in your bank account, but the love in your heart, the strength of your character, and the people you share it with. And that, I can tell you, is priceless. They learned to invest in relationships, not just portfolios. And that's a legacy far more valuable than any inheritance.